that's not a water tote. Like, what is that? And then this voice in my head was just like, get in your car right now. So I just grabbed open the door. Thankfully, I was like right next to my car still. Grabbed open the door and I just jumped in. Hi, I'm Dana, and last year I moved off-grid to build my own off-grid homestead, and I failed. This video is pretty late because I ended up getting COVID and it totally kicked my butt. And I am still trying to recover from it weeks later. If you haven't seen part 1 or 2 of my story, you may want to go back and watch those. They could possibly answer some questions you may have. When I left off in part 2, I had just purchased my shipping container and I was finally getting ready to build my hyper adobe structures. So Kendra and I were digging out the rubble trench by hand all day, every day, in the hot sun, bumping tunes from my battery powered radio. We were making progress, but it was definitely very slow. And the clock was ticking. Winter was approaching really quickly. And I knew I needed to find a faster way to get this done. Then Kendra got a call from her work. They had a job for her. I dropped her off at the airport, and then when I got back to my land, I started looking for someone with a bobcat that could finish digging out the trenches for us. Thankfully, in the Facebook group for the subdivision, there was a list of resources in the area. One of them was labeled heavy machinery, so I thought that sounded promising. The name listed with that was Sal, so I gave Sal a call. By the way, if you hear snoring in the background, that is my parents' oldest dog. She likes to sleep on my bed all day, every day. It's really sweet. So Sal ended up being awesome. He gave me a really reasonable quote. And he showed up when he said he was going to. So Sal used his bobcat. He dug out the rest of the trenches for us, and he told me that if I had continued by hand, there was no way I would have been able to finish because big chunks of the ground underneath where we were digging were almost like solid rock. It was crazy. And like, I know he was telling me the truth because I was watching him dig everything out, and there was a part where even his bobcat was struggling to move the earth, and I realized like he's just digging out like large rock from underneath the ground. So we definitely never would have been able to get through that on our own. And so I'm really thankful that I had another one of those moments where I kind of like gave in and decided to call for help and spend some money to try to get something done. After the rubble trench was finished being dug, I knew I needed 2 types of rock to go into the trench. I forget the first kind of rock that I put down. I forget what it was called, but it's commonly used in that area around septic tanks. And on top of that, I put 3/4 rough. I was kind of dreading calling the rock guy because I knew it was going to be expensive, and I was talking to Sal about it, and he's like, oh, I do rock delivery too. He gave me a quote. It was like double the amount of rocks for like half the price. So Sal saved the day again, and I placed my rock order with him, and he showed up a little bit later with the rocks. It was awesome. Other guy that gave me the rock quote, I don't think he was ripping me off. This is like another thing about living further away from society, is that not everybody wants to do that drive out there. You know, it may not be worth it to them. The good thing with Sal is that he kind of like lived in that area, and it wasn't like as huge of a deal for him to drive out to my property as would be for the other guy that does rock delivery that lives further away. This was a really fun and exciting time on my land. Like, I was seeing progress being made on the rubble trench. I was living there alone for the first time and like seeing how that felt and what that looked like. The weather was cooling off, so the days weren't as harsh, and the nights were definitely getting chillier, but they weren't bad at all by any means. So it just was a really wonderful pocket of time. One night during that time, I realized I really had to pee, and it was only 9:30 p.m. I had been like nestled in my car, just kind of chilling, like I did every night when it was dark out, and it was pitch dark. Like, even though this was during the time of the moon hadn't risen yet, so everything was just pitch dark because the sun had already fully set. And I decided just to grab my headlamp, get out of my car, walk over to where I usually go to the bathroom, went to the bathroom, everything went fine, got back to my car, and I kind of paused right before getting in and looked up and the sky was just incredible. Just so many stars. It was so beautiful. I had this moment where I could finally like feel like I could just like breathe and relax, because so much of this process felt so like rushed and chaotic and stressful because of the timeline, that it was nice to have this moment in the evening that was just like beautiful. I could pause for a little bit and just think about how like I actually get to chase my dream. You know, I actually get to try to make this dream happen. And part of the dream already happened, because one of my dreams for like almost my entire life was to own my own land, and there I was standing on it. So anyway, I'm in this beautiful moment on my land, and I like decided to put some music on my phone, and I feel like such a cheesy girl saying this, but I was dancing a little bit under the stars to my music on my land, just totally absorbed in happiness. And then I got this really weird feeling. I stopped and I looked over to my left. Like there shouldn't have been anything there, but I could see a little bit through the darkness this like pure black, like almost like square shape, large square shape. And at first I thought, oh, you're being silly. It's your water totes, you know? And as I got to thinking about it, I thought, no, the water totes would be like in front of that. That's not a water tote. Like, what is that? And then this voice in my head was just like, get in your car right now. So I just grabbed open the door. Thankfully, I was like right next to my car still. Grabbed open the door and I just jumped in. And at that moment, one of my security lights came on. I had these lights on my property that were solar powered, but they were sensor lights, so they only came on at night if there was motion. The sensor light kicks on, and what I see in the bright light is a giant bull that was charging at me. I didn't know because it was pitch dark before he got close enough to kick the sensor light on. And if I had not gotten in my car when I did, he would have hunted me into another dimension. I would probably be dead on the desert floor right now. I actually like braced when the light went on and I saw him in a full run towards my car, because I thought he was just going to slam into my car, but thankfully he hit the brakes when he saw that, you know, I had gotten in my car and I wasn't there anymore, wasn't outside the car anymore. So I'm really thankful he didn't slam into my car. I'm really thankful he didn't slam into me, because the nearest hospital was at least 40 minutes away and I was alone. And if I mangled, I don't know if I would have been able to necessarily drag myself into the car and drive myself there. So, you know, just one of those things about being far from society is stuff like that can happen and you may not necessarily have help. Definitely listen to your gut. With my motion sensor light on, I could see that there were like other cows with him, and I climbed through to my front seat of my car and I started my car up so that my headlights would turn on and I could see more. And when they did, I saw that my entire camp was invaded by cows. The entire thing. They were just like walking around, stepping on everything without even noticing. It was kind of humorous to watch if it wasn't like my stuff and they were just like haphazardly walking around my solar panels, which they thankfully did not crush, but they easily could have. But it was just a full-on cow invasion. The rancher that I had seen in that area, he drove a little pickup truck and he would always herd the cows with the truck by like honking at them. And so I just started honking and like kind of driving forward little bits and actually was able to herd them off of my prop. I was really lucky that at that time I was living in my car and I could easily do that, because if I were living in a structure, I'd have to try to get to my car first, which can be extremely dangerous, because even though the cows were mostly chill, those bulls, you really cannot trust them. And obviously they're large animals, you can't trust them anyway, but they make it very dangerous. I know one of my neighbors, he had to kill a bull. He had to shoot him with a shotgun because he was so aggressive at actually attacking my neighbor's house. And if you're wondering like how I didn't hear the cow horde like creep onto my property, I mean, I was listening to a little bit of music, not loud, but the other thing is, even before that, before I started playing my music, you know, I have a hard time like hearing quieter noises, and those cows, they're not like racing around you know, they move really slow and they just sort of like slowly, like slow water, make their way into wherever. And I have tinnitus because I have Meniere's disease. It's a vestibular disease and part of it is tinnitus. And so I just have near constant tinnitus. I think the last time that the tinnitus stopped for a little bit was at least 4 years ago because I was in Germany at the time. And I know what bedroom I was sleeping in there, you know, so I could kind of like figure out the timeline from that. It's basically near constant tinnitus and it just makes it super hard to hear any quiet noises. They don't even register, they can't get past the like, ah noise like that's in my ears all the time. So the day after the cow infestation, I realized Kendra's gonna be returning soon. The rubble trench is done, you know, like we can actually build hyper adobe now. So I wanted to get everything ready for when she got back. I decided to go to Harbor Freight and get a cement mixer. And that morning I woke up to this insane windstorm. And that's just notorious for the area that I lived in. They get really crazy windstorms. With the windstorm, I was like, I don't know what to do because I really want to go get the cement mixer, but I don't have any room in my shipping container to build it. And it's like a totally insane windstorm outside, you know. I just decided to go get it anyway. And what I did was I parked my car facing into the wind, the front of my car facing into the wind, and then out the back, even though wind kind of still would whip around and everything, I could at least get a little protection. I was like nestled against my shipping container and I could get like a little bit of wind protection. So I spent a whole day in a windstorm just like assembling the cement mixer. It was kind of chaotic, but I got it done. I also texted my water guy and set up a delivery for water because something I kept hearing about a hyper adobe building is like, oh, that really uses a lot of water. So I was like, okay, I want to make sure I have a bunch of water on hand. I've got the mixer going. The windstorm lasted for 4 days. And so I mostly just spent like 4 days in my car and then I would like here and there make my way like to the shipping container, try to pry the door open, get in there a little bit, close the door, use multiple bungees to try to keep the door shut so I could do little things in the shipping container. But it was definitely really dangerous and thankfully I didn't get whacked by that door, but there are many times I could have and it destroyed 2 of my bungees. Like the wind was so strong that even having the container door open a teeny bit just boom, like decimated the bungee cords. So that's something else to consider with like these shipping containers is I didn't have like a handle on the inside. It was only on the outside. And so I couldn't like fully shut the door. So it was like perfect timing. Like the day the windstorm ended is the day that Kendra got back. So we could just like get to work on hyper adobe building, which was so fun. I had just been like waiting for that part this whole time. And we got to figuring out like how to, you know, get the mixer to work right and what kind of mixture we needed for the hyper adobe and just started laying bags. And it's so funny because I keep a 3-year diary. Every day I write down just a little something about that day and it can hold 3 years worth of daily journaling. So during that time when I look back in my journal, it was just like me obsessively being like, I can't wait to get the walls up. Gotta get these walls up. I'm so excited for the walls to come up. Like I was just obsessed with getting those hyper adobe bags laid and the walls up. And every day we got out there and we did as much as we could. So I want to go off on a tangent for a moment, but it's an important one. So I didn't know where else to really fit it in, and I just decided to fit it in here. During this time, I had to secure a PO box. It's something I've been trying to do since I got there, but there's definitely like a process that you have to follow. I'm sure it's different for every county, but where I lived, like you actually had to have some kind of structure on your property before you could get your rural address. And then once you had your rural address, you could take that to your local post office and get a PO box. It definitely did take some time to get all of that stuff done, but I was able to get it done and get my PO box, which was really good because if you don't have anywhere to have mail sent to you and you have sort of like specialty stuff break, or you need to get like parts mailed to you, even if you need to like order parts off eBay for something to fix it, you can't get that if you don't have somewhere to mail it to, you know, like I really needed that PO box. I just want to mention that they require you to have like some kind of structure before they give you an address, just so your address is findable. And even when you're filling out the paperwork for it, you have to draw like where the structure is on your property and describe it. But they definitely never sent anyone out to verify that. Just so you know, just throwing that out there. Okay, so I'm telling you all this because back on our build, starting the first day that we were building, we were like, we definitely need a way to bathe. And I had purchased a solar shower before I got to my land, and I brought it with, I just hadn't broken it out yet. I was kind of just like surviving on baby wipes for a long time. Which I know sounds gross, but hey, when you're out there and you're just trying to get stuff done, you're just kind of like doing what you can quickly. But we definitely were working up a sweat doing the Hyperadobe build, and I knew it was going to be a lot of work and dirty work. So I got out the shower, filled it up with water. It's the kind where you leave it in the sun all day and actually like warms the water up, so you can have a hot shower, or at least a warm shower at the end of your day. At the end of that day, I told Kendra, like, go for it. Go take your shower, and if there's water left, I'll take one too, you know? She ended up coming back like a minute later. She was like, it's not working. So I walked over, messing around with it forever. Like, it's not a complicated contraption, you know, there's like a little inflatable whoopee cushion shaped thing, which is a pump that you pump with. And then there's a tube that comes out of the main area that holds the water that has a little spout on it that you can shower with. It's not complex, and it was not working at all. That was so disappointing, but thankfully I had my PO box. So the next day I contacted the manufacturer, and they were like, can we send you parts? And it worked out perfectly that I just gotten this PO box and they could actually send me parts. And that is another thing that I think I've mentioned in previous videos, is just because they're sending you parts doesn't mean they're going to get there quickly. This could easily be a month before the parts even arrive, and you can try to fix this. So, and that was pretty much what it was. I think it took about a month before I could get the parts for it. And thankfully the parts worked. It actually like solved the issue. And sadly, like by the time I got the replacement parts for that shower, it was too cold to shower outside, even during the daytime. Like, it was winter and it was cold, and I ended up never even using it. I feel like this is a good place to break down to you guys like what the average day on my property looked like while building Hyperadobe. And obviously, like, this will look different for everyone, but this is just what life was like for me out there. So I would wake up every day before the sun rose. And I wasn't trying to or anything. I am an early bird. I would just wait until the sun was up a little bit and I could kind of see what was around me before I'd get out of my car and go to the bathroom. So I'd often just kind of like wake up and wait. Once I'd gone to the bathroom and there's a little more light going on, I'd unlock my shipping container. I stored all my clothes in there, so I'd go in there and change out of my pajamas and get dressed for the day. Then I would pull out all my cooking supplies and my food from the shipping container and cook breakfast, eat, clean up breakfast, put away food stuff that needed to be put away. Then I would get the Hyperadobe build supplies out of the shipping container and get that set up. And then we'd build Hyperadobe for as long as we could. It'd be like a 3-4 hour stretch. This was usually a good time to break for lunch, so I'd get all the food stuff out that I needed to get out of the shipping container, make lunch, eat lunch, and then put things away. And if you're wondering why there's so much like pulling things out, why don't you leave them out? It's because that area can get really windy really quickly and your stuff will be gone. So I tried to really keep things as contained as possible, as much as possible, to like lessen the risk of it getting blown away and destroyed. After lunch, like we'd usually pack up the lunch stuff, we'd pack up the Hyperadobe build stuff, we would pull the bedding out of the back of my car, because that's where we were sleeping. We put the bedding in the shipping container. And then I'd also take my solar generator, which is something I get out in the morning. Totally forgot to mention that before. And I'd lug it back into the shipping container, which means I'm missing out on collecting energy during like one of the brightest parts of the day. But I didn't want to risk leaving it out and getting stolen because we needed to head to town. if you saw my other 2 videos, then you know that my solar cooler like died and it never even, worked on my land. It worked for 1 day on my road trip out there and never worked again. So I had to keep my food cold using ice. So that meant that we had to go into town every day for ice, because even though it was cooling off, it was still warm enough that it would melt all the ice in the coolers every single day. We'd have to pack up everything on the property, lock it in the shipping container, and then get in the car and drive 40 minutes to an hour to the nearest town to get ice. During this time too, if we needed other supplies, food, tools, whatever, we would pick it up during this time. And then we drive the 40 minutes to an hour back to my property. When we get back, and I just want to remind you, this is every day. I'm still on the just what we did every day. So we would get back from running this errand where we're basically gone for 2 hours. We would get back. The first thing I would do is unlock the shipping container, pull out my solar generator, hook it back up to my solar panels so they can continue to get energy. And then we would start unloading the car. I would take the coolers, drag them to the edge of the property, drain the water, excess water out of them, drag them back, clean out any old gross food, fill them back up with the fresh ice. Then we'd unload any other supplies that we bought if we did get supplies that day. Then we would wipe down the back of my car, because even though I had like a bag to put the ice in, it would often leak anyway, so I wanted that all to be dry. We'd unload all the Hyper Adobe equipment back out of the shipping container, get it back into place. Then I'd grab the bedding out of the shipping container with my car, in the back of my car dry, put the bedding back in the back of the car so it was ready for that evening for when we went to bed. And then we'd get back to building Hyper Adobe as much as we could before the sun would start to set. When the sun would start to set, I knew we had kind of maybe like an hour of light still, and so I'd pack up all the Hyper Adobe back in the shipping container, get out the food stuff, cook dinner, eat dinner, clean up dinner, pack all the food stuff away for the night, and then go into my nightly routine, which would be to like bathe in some fashion. I was like bathing in a $4 tote that I bought at Walmart. Ice cold, ice cold water, but I was really thankful to have like a way to clean off. And then I'd bundle up and get in my pajamas and brush teeth and all of that stuff before the sunset, in which case I wanted to be in my car by that time and not have anything that I have to do on the property or outside. So as you can tell, like the days went by pretty fast, because it's just you're constantly doing something all day, every day. And it's not like I didn't expect to have a lot going on, because I was taking on like a huge endeavor, but I definitely wasn't anticipating losing like a solid 2+ hour chunk of my day every day to driving into town to get ice. That was a hard one. And I just thought like, oh, we would just be on the land most days, all day building. It just wasn't the case. Every about 4 days or so, the schedule would change a little bit because I needed to do laundry. I would lose a morning to doing laundry, but I needed to have clean clothes, because you're not just like kind of sweating out there, you're like sweating a lot and you're in like dirt a lot, like you get really dirty. And so I wanted to be able to like just have fresh clothes all the time, and I didn't have a ton of clothes, so I'd run out of them fairly quickly. And that's another thing is, yeah, you could bring more clothes, but where are you going to store them? So I had only so much clothes because I only had so much space. I can't just take them to like a laundromat because I'm allergic to all of those scented laundry detergents. Laundry detergents are like the worst because they're designed to last and cling. If I use a machine that someone's been using a ton of those stinky laundry detergents in, they'll actually like cling to my clothes. And then when I'm wearing my clothes and my body heat warms the clothes up, the smells really start, like off-gassing, and I get really sick. And the last thing that I wanted to do out there is be sick, because I had so much to do. Yeah, that made it that every 4 to 5 days was a laundry day, and I did my laundry by hand, and that meant that I would lose an entire morning that I could have been building to doing my laundry. I tried to do laundry in the afternoon. Not that it matters, like you're still losing the same amount of time, but would be excited to build and want to build in the morning. And then I realized that doing the laundry in the afternoon didn't give my clothes enough time to dry on the line, even though it's hot out there in the desert. They would still be wet when I'd be having to pull pull them in at night. And if you're wondering like, hey, Dana, like, why are you trying to get all this stuff done before sundown? You have a headlamp, you know, you could still do things at night. That is true. But the nighttime is just so much more dangerous in a lot of ways. And the main one for me is visibility. Even with a headlamp, you can still run into issues. There are so many wild animals out there that I did not want to tangle with ever, but especially at night. I really learned from that bull interaction that I had that like, you may not want to mess with the nighttime. Like, this may not be the best time to be roaming around on your property. Like, if I had a fence, I would have felt better about it, you know, but not having a fence and any animal can just stroll on over, it made me a little more worried. And there weren't just the bulls to worry about out there. We had a wild pack of dogs that roamed that whole area together. And I saw from the Facebook group, yes, they had attacked people. That worried me, you know? Didn't really want to get attacked by a wild pack of dogs. There were also like over 100 coyotes out there that would travel around in packs of about 10, and they also attacked neighbors of mine, so I also knew that they attacked people. Anyway, back to the build. Kendra and I were cranking every day trying to get as much hyper adobe down, and it just was not a lot. It was never a lot. You know, it's really funny, like when I decided I wanted to do this, and I would tell people like, I'm gonna go try to build a hyper adobe, people would say, oh, that's labor intensive. Like literally almost everyone. It was kind of like, I'm like, am I running into NPCs? Is this like NPC programming to say that? Because I would think, well, I'm talking about building actual like structure that you could live in, like a building. You know, how could that not be labor intensive, even if you're doing like timber build stuff? I still think of that as being like a pretty laborious effort. So it got kind of annoying hearing that. And when I was on my property, you know, Kendra and I would talk about it a lot because she was getting the same thing. She's like, oh my God, people keep saying this to me. I'm like, I know, it's so annoying. And I said to her, I was like, it's not that it's labor intensive, like labor is part of it. Like that's like, you're literally laboring. That's like the activity. That's what I would expect. I was like, it's time intensive. It takes so much freaking time to build, you know, like there was only 2 of us. Even if we had double, like actually don't think we could have gotten one of the structures done before winter hit, because it just takes time. It takes time to dig the dirt and sift it. It takes time to put it in the cement mixer. It takes time to load it into the wheelbarrow and roll it over and scoop it up and get it in the bag and tamp the bags. It just takes time. Building in hyper adobe is really good for like large families and cults. I think those are the groups that would be like excellent for building in this style. It just takes like a lot of hands. I had been so obsessed with like just getting walls up, but in reality, like we were still laying bags below ground level, just trying to get the foundational bags down. And the clock was ticking. Like the days were really starting to get colder, and I realized like it was another one of those moments where I'm like, I need to do something because this is not working. So I decided that I really needed to look for help. The first thing that I did was go into the Facebook group, and I just made a post like, hey, if anyone in the area is thinking about doing this kind of building and you want to get hands-on experience, like feel free to come and join us. And it's really amazing. Like I wasn't on there begging, I wasn't on there crying, I wasn't I don't know, I wasn't like trying to be forceful or anything. I was just throwing it out there because, you know, a lot of people will pay like a lot of money to go to like a hyper adobe build like retreat or whatever where you learn it, and I'm like, you could just do it with us for free, you know. I'm not even asking for you to pay us. That would feel crazy. And like the first response was this dude that lives in the area, and he was just laughing, just ha 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 ha. And I was like, that is so weird. Like, okay, like what a rude response for someone just throwing it out there. It wasn't until I left my property, but I actually got responses from people in the group that were interested in coming and helping. It was just like way too late. And it's so weird stuff like that to me, because it's like, just because that guy's not interested doesn't mean no one would be interested. There are people interested in this. So that and some other things were kind of like reasons why I decided to stop posting the Facebook group. Maybe in the next video I'll explain the other incident that happened. So anyway, my first attempt at like trying to put feelers out there, you know, see if there's help, was a big time failure. And I was watching the temperature, my weather around me and realizing like we're gonna be dipping into freezing temperatures like really soon. And the thing I learned with Hyper Adobe from the book that I was following to do my build is that if there are freezing temperatures, it really can't cure properly. So I was definitely really worried about putting all of this money, time, and effort into something that could potentially, like, I don't know, I was like picturing it just like crumbling in the wind. Yet again, another painful decision. Do I want to be sleeping in my car all winter? No. Like, okay, I need to figure out something. If you're finding any of this helpful or at least entertaining, you can laugh at my own demise, please do me a solid and just hit the like button below. And if you feel like helping me in other ways, you could consider prepping for the holidays by purchasing some of my wrapping paper or tissue paper. Or you could get ready to win the Ugly Christmas Sweater contest at your work by buying one of my ugly Christmas sweaters. Next time I'll share about what I purchased to live in, the worker that I did find to help with the Hyper Adobe build, and what ultimately broke the camel's back and sent me running back to society and back on grid. It will hopefully be the final chapter of the series. I really thought this was just going to be like 2 videos long, and this is the end of video 3, but we're almost there. We're almost to the end. So thank you if you're still listening. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.
So cutie, you're so cute. How?